Hello, everyone. Welcome to this edition of Wine Women and Words. Joining me, as always, is Michelle.
Hello.
And we have the pleasure of having a returning guest. We're very excited to have her again, Kate Quinn. Thank you for joining us and talking about the Briar Club with us. Do I have that right? Oh. So
Oh,
thank you
totally
so
good.
much.
No, thank you. Thank you for having me. Always good to be back.
Yes, now we do have the rule. I've adjusted the rule because we do have to make good on our well, we have this tradition where on the fifth episode that we record with somebody, we go to you and we record
Yes.
there. And the problem is that we have to we plan on having Greer McAllister on the show, and it'll be her fifth time. And so now we actually have to make good on that. So I believe, Michelle, are we at the five? Did we agree that we were going to move it up?
Yeah, originally it was seven, and I think Greer might actually be hitting the seventh
No, it was
time this
five.
year.
It was
Oh, it
five.
was
It was five,
five?
and now we're talking about moving it. We're moving up to seven?
Oh, that's what it was. That's what it
Yeah.
was. So yes, we have, our Wine Women Awards punch cards for
Hmm.
all of our authors. And as we check each one off at every time you come on the show. And yes, by the fifth or seventh, whichever one we decided
Hmm.
time, we come to you and we bring wine and we
Yes.
do the episode in person.
And
And we've
snacks.
been talking about this for so long that now we're starting to have authors on for five or seven times that and now we have to make good on our word. And you're getting very close to the fifth time. I
I
think
believe
this
this
is the
is the
fourth,
third or fourth?
third or fourth. Let's
I
see.
am
Hold on.
drawing a blank, but I am happy to drink wine with you ladies any day.
Now I'm gonna have to go back and check now. But we are here to talk about your new book on the third or fourth time you're joining us. So, for our listeners who may not yet be familiar with it, can you give us an overview of what the story is about?
The Briar Club is, in a nutshell, a book about a group of very different women who really have nothing in common except that they all live in the same, slightly shabby, down at the heels, all women's boarding house in early 1950s Washington, D.C. And it takes the arrival of a new and somewhat mysterious boarder, a widow from Iowa who moves into the attic room on the top floor, to make them realize, with the advent of a weekly supper club and her special son tea, that they have a little more to offer each other in ways of friendship and support than they thought to enrich each other's lives. But they also realize that they all have secrets and that some of those secrets are going to be deadly.
Yes, as you find out right at the very beginning. And one of the things from the very beginning, from the get-go, is the personification of the house. I mean, that's not a spoiler. That's like right there in the prologue of the book. Um, I love that you did that. I always get fascinated when people do personification in their novels. Uh, let's talk a little bit about that and giving voice to the house, which is just such a unique voice. I am loving it.
Well, it is something that actually came relatively late in the writing process for this book. I already knew that, there was going to be this book was going to be in like 8 or 9 parts where you delve in turn into each of the women who lives in Briarwood House. And then the connective tissue between is the part which touches back to a certain day, which is Thanksgiving 1954, which is the day that there is a corpse on the floor and you don't know who it is or who might have put it there. And whenever you touch back to that section, originally when I was writing it, it was from the point of view of the detective who had come to the house and is faced with a house full of uncooperative witnesses and a body and is trying to figure out what is going on. But the more I got into that, the more I realized that I wasn't really interested in researching and writing police procedural stuff. I like reading it, but I didn't really want to write about it, and I wasn't really interested in the detective. So I thought, well, who can be the eyes through which we see the murder unfolding and the investigation afterward? And what popped into my head was that phrase, the old phrase, if these walls could talk. And I thought, well, maybe the walls can talk in some way or other. So I had the idea, well, can the house itself be a little bit sentient, and figuring out invested in what is happening inside it. I liked that idea and I ran with it, and it ended up really working thematically with the book, because a lot that this book is about thematically is what makes a house a home. And when you first see this house back in 1950, when the widow from Iowa arrives and takes that final room in the attic, it's just a house. The people who live there are all ships that pass in the night. Nobody's very friendly, but she brings about a lot of changes, and people inside start feeling more like a family. They start being more friendly with each other, and the house itself seemed like a really great way to explore that. What is it that turns a collection of strangers into a group of friends and ultimately a family? What is it that makes a building with four walls and a roof into a home? And that in the end, it ended up being the house that told that part of the story.
And the house is sassy. I'm enjoying the house's sassy, sarcastic sense of humor.
Well, if you're going to have a sentient house, there's no reason it can't have a sense of humor. I mean, if it has a soul, it has a sense of humor. Why not?
I think that's actually like a requisite. If you're going to make the house sentient, it should be sassy. That's really because then it would be boring if it didn't have a sense of humor. So I
If they
love
have a
that,
sense of humor, what's it going to talk about? Mice. It's
right?
plumbing problems. It's like, no, you got to have a house with a sense of humor.
Mhm.
Absolutely. Otherwise, it's just like the wallpaper is peeling in the guest room again, and that's it. No
Yeah.
commentary, just noting that the wallpaper needs to be replaced.
No, it's like that's not going to be fun.
No.
Now,
So, oh, nope, you go.
okay. I don't want to just bombard with all the questions and everything. I'll let you go, Michelle.
Well, I was just going to say I love the idea that the the concept that, it only takes like one thing to kick off, a huge change, not even necessarily in fiction and writing, but in life in general, how you can look back and pinpoint when exactly something changed or, started changing. But I love that concept in books and stories, where it all comes down to one thing happening, and in this case, it being the woman from Iowa coming in and kind of kickstarting all of that. Um, how do you like exploring that evolution for each character when they really start noticing, that, oh, well, we're more than just tenants or lodgers in this house. We're really something a little bit more.
Well, it's something I really did some thinking about during lockdown, when I really was missing my friends and I was missing those dinner tables, where you'd have loved ones sitting around, over scraped plates and half empty glasses of wine. And, that was something I missed and a lot of us were missing. And it made me think about community and how important it is. And I think there are certain people who have a gift for community. They're connectors. They are people who pull others around them. And that is someone who that's a personality type I admire. And that is who Grace is. She's the newest arrival at Briarwood House. She's a widow with a somewhat mysterious past, and she has this gift for community. She has a way of pulling people around her and observing them and being able to figure out when something is wrong and when you need to ask a question like, is there something going on? Is there a way we can help? And the way that I ended up structuring the book is, it starts with her arrival and then it moves through the viewpoints sequentially of all the different women who live in the house. And you see that all of them have secrets, and it's not even necessarily huge secrets, but it's just the things that we keep private. We have our own issues that we try not to show the world. And Grace tends to be the one who can pinpoint those things. So for all of the women in their different ways, she ends up being the person who is there to offer advice in some key moment, or to provide a listening ear at some moment, or just, to turn up with a bottle of brandy and say, like, I think you need this, let's talk. And that kind of person is, invaluable to have in your own life if you are lucky enough to have one. And of course, because it is a Kate Quinn novel, there is also the idea that as you go through the book, that you will start to observe, as the women in Briarwood House do, that the woman who is the best at listening is also the best at not talking about herself. So even though she knows all their secrets, nobody knows hers, and hers are a real doozy, and you won't find those out until the end. And a certain murder that happens on Thanksgiving 1954 kicks off.
Yes, and that's the fascinating. And the mom and the proprietor of Briar House, she is one that at times I find myself chuckling about, and other times I just want to just wring her neck in the most pleasant way possible, I suppose. We're talking murder here, but murder, like wring her neck, because my God. But
Well,
I don't want to give it.
I knew I wanted an unsympathetic landlady if we had a book about a boarding house, because one of the reasons this house is not particularly a home and these women have not been very friendly is that their landlady doesn't really encourage it. She does not do anything that would make the house feel like a welcoming place for anyone, including her own children. So there's the idea that when the book begins, this is a house full of strangers in gathering around a dinner table where the food is never good, and the kids in the house do not have any kind of fun lifestyle, even though they live in what is supposed to be the golden age for children, to be white middle class kids in America in the 1950s. But it's they do not have a good childhood, and all you needs is one person to come in and start thinking, I think we can fix a few of these things. And of course, because that's where you start with the food.
Because food is just the center of all life. Let's face it, that's the big thing.
Well, it's one of the most universal human urges, I think, is the urge to feed people or to pull people around a table and sit down and eat together. I mean, there's nothing more common to any culture, any country, anywhere. People have to sit down to eat, and that's one of the best ways to get to know people is if you pull people around a table and you feed them. So I always knew from the beginning this was going to be a book that had a lot of food in it, and it was a good way too to examine what is a portion of the past look like when you examine what people are eating. And I did include recipes in this book because I've always wanted to do that,
Yes.
recipes book. And I can tell you that all of them have been, with a couple of exceptions that I got from a couple of food bloggers, all of them have been tested and cooked at home and developed here in Kate Quinn by my husband, who is very much the cook of the family and a really great cook. So he had a lot of fun doing the recipes for this particular book.
Yeah, I'm glad you brought that up, because I love the recipes in the book, because I want to try some of the recipes. I was actually reading this while I was at Disneyland, and I'm not waiting for the train, and the recipe for the salad comes up, and I was like, oh, this sounds delightful.
Yeah, I had a lot of fun including those just because it also is a way to explore, because this is very much a book I think about, what it is to be an American during this particular time of history, which is I find interesting. The 50s are a time where they're sort of seen as like a very peaceful, uneventful decade in between, the war torn 40s and then the civil rights torn 60s. But there's a lot going on under the surface, and food is one way you can sort of explore what it is that it is like to be American at this time. Now, the 50s had some very weird food. I mean, I do not get this urge that they had in the 50s, like that, like if you have it, whatever it is, you can suspend it in Jello. That was not a good idea. And there were some casseroles. There are some casseroles that, frankly, are just so horrifying to read about that you will not want to eat for a week. But there's also really great food because also this is a way, since everybody takes turn cooking for their neighbors, everyone brings something different to the table from their own experiences. And all of these people, they come from different backgrounds. They come from different, mostly immigrant backgrounds, because that's what this country is based on. So the landlady's son is from a Swedish extraction family, so he brings Swedish meatballs. The girl from a big Irish police family brings colcannon, which is a classic Irish recipe. The gal who's an ex-baseball player from the women's leagues who came from Boston and specifically the North End, which is Italian. Of course, she brings like a Neapolitan specialty from her family. So it's a way too to explore, all the different cuisines that make up what we think of as American food.
Yes, and you don't really see that too much in historical fiction, where the food, like they talk about the food, but have the recipes included right there in the book It's so wonderful, and as somebody who loves to have food within the book and like go through the book, as Michelle knows, how much I nerd over food and history. Like that's one of the topics I could sit down and talk about, like history of food for days without any preparation. And I love that they have the recipes that are there.
Yeah, I think really food is one of those things. If you want to know more about the past, I want to know what people are eating for dinner. That's one of the things that will absolutely tell you so much about any time period in the past. Is just ask, what are they eating for dinner? What is a common ordinary dinner? What is a special occasion dinner? What is a celebratory banquet dinner? What does it cost? Where do people get it? Are they cooking? Are they bringing food in from outside? But what people eat, that is not unimportant scholarship. I mean, like what people eat is critical to understanding what a culture is like.
And the socioeconomics between the two, because what a struggling working class family of the 1950s is eating might not be the same as what somebody in the upper end echelon
Yeah.
of the economic scale would be eating. So I love all of that. And then also you throw in the cultural aspect of it too, because everybody has those comfort foods that we all tend to go for.
Yeah, and that's one thing I really did want to put in there, aside from just the idea that I love having food in books just because I like a book that makes me a little bit hungry.
You always want to have a snack while you're eating. I always do that myself.
Oh yeah.
And one of the things that we've kind of touched on and danced around a little bit is the subject of the history of the 1950s, because as you said, there was like that we have this tendency to look at the 1950s as this like calm in between two storms. And I don't know about you, but growing up in the 80s and the 90s, the 50s was looked at as very nostalgic. And you have all of this talk, um, not to get political or anything, but all of us talk about going back to the 1950s and the world of the 1950s and the culture of the 1950s. But I feel like I'm sure let's talk about some of the history that you've come across with this book and what was going on underneath that surface.
Well, it is, as you say, it's seen as this idyllic time, or, depending on who you're talking to, a repressive time, of peace and domesticity between the war driven upheaval in the 40s and, the civil rights and upheaval of the 60s. But as with most outwardly peaceful periods of history, there really is a lot going on under that surface. You have the hangover from World War II, which is far from over. You have the desire for social change coming to a boil, even though its effects aren't going to be felt for a few years. And that was one of the things I really wanted to get into. And it seemed to me that the US would be the best location to set a 50s book because America was very much taking the lead during that decade throughout the world, because in large part, we were prosperous and so much of the rest of the world was rebuilding from the war. And so the America was eager to take the lead in everything from, scientific advancement to the space race. And so you had a lot of this forward thinking, but at the same time, you had so many backwards attitudes in so many other ways. You have segregation and racism still rampant. You have women who are hamstrung in the workplace, going from Rosie the Riveter during World War II and now to being pushed back into the feminine ideal of, the 50s housewife who doesn't work. You have anti-communist fervor leading to witch hunts where innocent people's lives are being destroyed just because of what they believed or who they know. So those two juxtapositions really made for a great setting for a story, I thought, because when you have a big contrast in an era, I think that's where you have a lot of grist for a story.
And one of the other things too that I feel like it's a recent history that I've learned is also like the McCarthyism didn't just target communists, it targeted people of the LGBT community as
Yeah,
well.
the Red Scare was, the main thing that people remember. But inside the Red Scare, you have what they call the Lavender Scare, which was specifically gay men and women being targeted, and that was absolutely part of this era. And people were all had their lives destroyed for that if you weren't conforming to the sexual norm. And yet, this was also the period that had the Kinsey report come out, and the Kinsey report proved, and it put it out there, because thousands of people have been interviewed for it, that this idea that sex was just this thing that happened in the dark, between two married people, maybe once a week, but that's the only way that it happens. It blew all that apart. The idea that there was all kinds of homosexual sex that was happening between men, between women, and between all other possible combinations. You had all kinds of things that were in fact the norm, even if society didn't say they were the norm. So again, it's that juxtaposition that is fascinating, and it's definitely something that I got into in the Briar Club. I won't spoiler free, but there is a character who very much has to be in a closet, to keep their own life safe and to keep their lives of their lovers safe as well.
Now, I remember when you joined us for the Rose Code, we had a really fun discussion about all the slang that you got to use and the research that you went into for slang from the 1940s. And for the life of me, I cannot remember. I want to say like something was like fizzed. Was it fizzed? Or something about fizzing or fizzy, but I can't remember.
Yes, you could say that you're utterly fizzed about
there we
something.
go. I'm glad that I remembered right. But I was curious just while we were chatting if there was any 1950s slang that you were able to work into this novel, just to see the difference, not only in countries, but also decades, to see how the slang evolved.
It definitely does. And I found it less with slang than I was having to make sure that to just check the etymology of so many words and phrases to see were they using those phrases at this point. Mm-hmm. That is, and etymology is one of those big things that that is will just be the devil's in the details. It's like you'll just be thinking, were they saying this at this point? Could I say that? And then you're not sure and you have to look it up. So that was really the thing I found more with here. But one of the other things besides the food and the language was music. I ended up with all the recipes, I paired them up with a song, and I did a lot of song titles as well. I swear I had in the background pulled up almost permanently, like what was the chart topping radio hits for like this month out of this year, so that way I can see like what are people listening to on the radio. And that was fun because I ended up putting a Spotify playlist together, which I have, and which I'm going to put out for readers too, which is all the music that's mentioned in the book. If you would like to have a playlist to play along while you read.
I love that. I did that for both of my first two books, a playlist that I listened to, and it was mostly the songs that inspired me for the book that made me think about the characters. But I love it that you were able to put that not just what inspired you, but also like inspired some of the recipes and things like that they go together with it.
Yeah, music and food, I think, are things that are incredibly evocative of a period. So it's always fun to be able to dig those out for people.
And also a really fun, just kind of touch of historical accuracy to be able to say, to just kind of like insert that in the background if a radio's on and the song is playing, to be like, no, that really was what they would have listened or what could have been playing because that was a top hit during that month, during that year.
Yeah, absolutely. That's what I had in mind.
So I know we have our super. Has Kate ever done our
I think
super
she's done our
scientific?
super.
Okay, all right.
Yeah,
so we can skip that. But I know we talked about all the voices in the book and how they progress through the story to. Oh my gosh, my words are just like not coming up. Let me try that. Let me try that again. Of course, you have this cast of characters and their story unfolds obviously as the book progresses. But this is a question that I really love asking authors, and that's how they go about creating individual, unique voices for each character without making it sound like the same narrator, just using maybe like a slightly different words for a different character, like how to create that unique voice for each member of your cast.
I always like to think of it as, you think first of all of like just like with a voice that you'd hear, it's like, do you think they speak fast or slow? Are they going to be slangy and like would they be slangy and use up to the minute, slang, or are they going to be a little more reserved or traditional in their talking? Are they going to be quiet? Are they going to be, loquacious? And something I always have to find is what is their exclamation? And like, and that's the kind of the thing where it might think like, why do you need to find that? But it's like, no, but if someone stubs their toe, what do they say? Are they the kind of the person who says, oh, and they're going to drop the F bomb? Or are they kind of the kind of person who would never drop an F bomb? So they're going to say, oh, sugar. Or are they going to say, what are they going to say? Like if it's, what are they going to say if they're saying, oh God, it's raining? Would they say, oh God? Would they say, oh this, oh that? It's like people need an exclamation, and I always make sure I have that. For this particular book, I tried to make sure, since I had a very large cast of characters, for one thing, I wanted to make sure that my wonderful audiobook narrator, Saskia Marlebelt, would be able to voice a large cast without going totally crazy trying to give like 9 different women very distinct voices. So that was one of the reasons I did make sure that I put them in different parts of the country so they could have traces of accent or of regional familiarity here and there. And that I did talk to her, and she actually said that was helpful. So I was really glad for that. But it was one of the things I did try to make sure that I got down, which was what is their exclamation? What are the words they use? Do they have slang or a cultural hangover that, inflects their language? So all of those things will play in when you're trying to make characters sound distinct.
Yeah, I just pulled up my Kindle and I was reading through, and there's 8 different perspectives that you're looking at that we
Yes,
have.
I think so.
My goodness, tried writing a book with 3 perspectives, and it nearly drove me crazy. Bless you for doing 8.
Well, it wasn't so hard for this book because I took the format, or it might sound like a lot, 8 points of view, but you don't get them all mixed in together. You get them all essentially one at a time. And because the point of view moves from chapter to chapter, each chapter introduces and jumps into the point of view of a different woman who lives at Briarwood House. So for 20,000 words, you have Nora's point of view, and she's the young woman who works at the National Archives and comes from a DC police family. Then you have the next 20,000 words is from Reka's point of view, and she's a woman in her 70s and is a refugee from Berlin in the 1930s and originally is Hungarian. You have, and then you get that 20,000 words and it's all her story. And then you jump to the next point of view. So that way you get a chance to sink really deep into each one, and hopefully it's not too confusing for the reader.
But what a smart way to approach your novel with that forethought for your audiobook narrator to put your characters from different parts of the world, different parts of the country, that would create those accents or those inflections that would make the audiobook narrator able to like, that's brilliant. Oh my gosh, I love that.
Well, I really feel fortunate to have Saskia as the narrator for so many of my
I
books
love
at this
her.
point. And I did not, I have a vested interest in not killing her or making her decide, like, that's it, I'm never doing a Kate Quinn novel again. This is enough. I'm out. So it's like, I would like to keep her working on my books for a long time to come. So I was like, I want to make this job easier for her if I can.
That's so smart. I love that. And I love the idea about what that's going to be a question now that I ask all, like, what's their exclamation? That's a really fun, also getting to know your character exercise.
It is. I actually find that's one of the most crucial things in trying to find someone's voice is what's their exclamation, and once I know that, I feel like I know them.
Hmm.
I love that.
I feel like with the book that I'm currently working on, I'm going to have to go through and like where I have all their exclamations all intact and all written down.
Because it does. It's like if they say if they say like oh, sugar snap, like that kind of you immediately, at least for me, you immediately picture how the voice sounds and what kind of their personality is. So that's really, I might steal that at some point in time, but I think that's
Feel free.
so smart. I
So,
jumped the
Kate, I
gun.
know you'd like to read a lot of books, and I know you've talked on social media about what the stack of books that you're reading. What book are you currently reading right now? I know it's a
Well,
loaded question.
I am actually reading. I'm head down in N.K. Jemisin's Broken Earth trilogy, which I have been had on
Ooh,
my TBR for a long time, and it is so worth it. I am so
is it?
I just started the third book in the trilogy. I'm just enwrapped. And in this whole world she's created, and she's brilliant. So I'm reading that. I took a break in the middle because it is heavy reading to read the latest Abby Jimenez, which I really enjoyed, and then also I just finished for my latest historical fiction, the Ballad of Jacques de la Haye by Bryony Cameron, which is just wonderful story about a black female pirate in the golden age of piracy in Hispaniola, who's trying to carve out
Ooh.
sort of a crew for herself and her ship, and also to win the heart of the woman that she is very much in love with. And that was just a story that absolutely hit all my spots. So that's what I'm reading right now.
That's a dangerous question to ask. Like, just keep at, but I have the first book in that series, and I've just like I keep saying like I'll come back for you, I'll come back for you, but
It's
I
so
have
good,
to get
so
I
good.
have to read it. And that's the second time in like a month that someone has randomly brought it up to me. Like, so I think that's a
It is
sign.
a
Now you
sign.
have to read
You have
it.
to read it now.
Mhm.
Okay, so now I can do my spiel.
Yeah.
So, yes, the book comes out on July 9th. So you can pre-order or order your own copy from our link to our bookshop on bookshop.org. As always, bookshop.org supports our incredible writers. It supports the podcast, but most importantly, it supports all the wonderful indie bookstores out there. And Kate, I think this is actually the fourth time because I was doing the math in my head, and we had you on for the Rose Code and the Huntress and uh the Alice. No, we don't think did we have
No,
you on that
I
for
think I
Alice
haven't.
Network?
No, I don't think so.
And then and now this one. So maybe third. Then I retract if not the Alice Network. So third. So your punch card is like halfway full now.
All right. Well, I'm looking forward to getting it full.
So that
Thank you
just
so
means you're
much
gonna have to
for
write more
making time
books.
for us. Yes.
No fear of that. I definitely have more in the pipeline.
Well, thank you so much for making time for us and coming to hang out again. We really appreciate having you here.
No, thank you so much for having me. It's always a delight, and I'll look forward to getting my dance card full someday so we can do this in person.
Yes. Wonderful.
Wonderful. Have a good night.
Have a good
You
night.
too.